scaffolding's up then, as you can see. That's quite a terrific job the guys did there. I mean, essentially it was just one chap up on the various roofs on our house, and a young lad and a really old fella handling all the boards and the poles and the various connections up as well. I mean, they turned up at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon and worked through the pouring torrential rain and blustery winds, and finished it eventually at about 8 o'clock in the dying moments of the final few rays of light, and managed to get it completed. So yeah, quite a job that, I think. So why we've got scaffolding up? Well, like I said, I talked to you about solar PV and why we decided to go for it, and then have a look at some of the advice that I can hopefully pass on to you, some of the things that I found out on the way, and and then talk about the specifics of the system that we are about to install, which is why the scaffolding has gone up. It's today is Saturday the 29th of August, and next Wednesday, which I think is the 2nd, quote me on it, next Wednesday anyway, is when the solar company come in and do our various installations. So why did we go for solar? Well, pure and simply wanted to save on my electricity bills. I've already mentioned in a previous video that we wanted to get our bills down, and so we changed supplier, went on to a sort of variable tariff which looks at wholesale rates, and so with a little bit of clever usage around the house, we're able to bring our rates, electricity rate down quite significantly. And in fact, we're somewhere between 9 and 11 pence at the moment per kilowatt on average through the day, and that's including the standing charge and VAT. So I think it's certainly one of the better ones around, and I should be able to report on that at the end of August, early September. I'll have the complete range then from sort of the first week in August all the way through August to give you an idea of what our spend was. So, okay, so why did we go for solar then? Like I said, it was to reduce our electricity bills. I was looking at my meter and just seeing, one, what we were paying, how much we were using, and so there's got to be a cheaper way of doing this. I think I, like most people, looked at solar as quite an expensive way of actually generating electricity or getting renewable energy. And I think actually it is getting better. It's certainly getting cheaper. You had a feed-in tariff, which prior to, I think, it's either January this year or April last year, I can't quite remember, certainly 2019-ish, early 2020, the government stopped the feed-in tariff. And that was a really good scheme, actually. So you'd throw some panels on your roof, the government would pay you for an amount which they deemed an approximation of what you would export, and would pay you silly money for every kilowatt that you actually exported back to the grid, and for every kilowatt that you used. So a really good money-making scheme, actually, for a lot of people, and you were able to pay back your solar costs within just a few years. So a really good scheme. That's no longer available, and the government now have launched in 2020, January 2020, was I think the SEG scheme, which is basically an energy guarantee, and the providers that provide the energy, the big six and a few others, will actually pay you per kilowatt that you put back into the grid, but it's only around somewhere between 4.5 and 6p. So not such a good scheme as the feed-in tariff, or the FIT as it was known. However, that said, the cost of solar panels has come down significantly. You should be able to get a solar array on your house just through a standard solar array with your inverter, which we'll talk about in a minute, for around late £4,000, early £5,000, something like that, at around £1.20 ish per kilowatt. Whereas, say, as early as maybe 5 years ago, that sort of array would cost you certainly double that, if not maybe a little bit more. So as the time has gone on, whilst the incentives have changed, so has the cost of the installation, and it's come down, like I say, quite significantly, and it's come in within reasonable ballpark now to actually, given when you make the calculations about what you would use, not so much what you'd feed back into the grid, but how much you'd save on a month. You should be able to get that return now within about maybe 7 or 8 years, perhaps, depending on what you actually do and how you go about it and what you ultimately spend. So it's getting there, certainly. And if you're looking about staying in your house for the foreseeable, I think it's a worthwhile investment. I had a little bit of money come my way by way of selling a motorcycle that was just sat in the garage and just getting a bit cobwebby and underutilized. And so I used that money, thought, well, how can I maximize my return? Been thinking about solar PV. Let's stick the bike on the roof and make it pay. So that was my idea. What I can recommend you do before calling out any installer is, first of all, get 3 quotes. I think is probably the best thing to do, and then you can get an idea between the people that are running the show, what their recommendations are, and ultimately cost, and that'll give you an idea. Don't just go with one. The next thing I'd recommend you do before you even call out your installer, or to get the quotes, before you elect an installer, in fact, is do a little bit of research. Have an idea really of what the costs are going to be. Talk to people that have had solar installations done. Search on the internet, search on YouTube. There are so many sources now of information. You can practically build the thing yourself. Assuming you're qualified, of course, in terms of the electrical requirements. But in terms of getting it up there and knowing what equipment that's required and how it all works, do that research first, so that when you're talking to the installers, they know that you know what you're talking about, and you're not going in there too green. And when they say something to you, one, you understand it, and two, you can sort of guide the path that you want to go, rather than the way in which they might want you to go. And I think that's really important. I'll come on to that in just a second. So do some research first. Understand the components of the solar system, the solar array on your roof. Get an idea of how many panels you can actually get on your roof, and then the types of inverters that are available. There's lots of information there on the internet. Solar Edge is a very popular inverter, and quite a clever inverter as well. That's the box basically converts the energy that comes through your roof into the solar panel into usable electricity that you can use in the house or transport back to the grid. Obviously, you'll have a budget as well about what you want to spend, and hopefully you'll be able to, and the idea then is to sort of work around that. So once you've got an idea of what you really want, once you have an idea of the roof space and how many panels that you're going to want to have on your roof, what your expenditure is going to be, the installers will ask you how many kilowatts you're using over the period of a year. You'll be able to find that out through looking through your electricity bill, your latest one. If you haven't got a full year with this particular supplier, then 6 months will do, and then you can sort of multiply that by 2 just to sort of give you an average. And they'll also want to know what your rate that you're paying. So I'll give them an idea on cost. Once you've got that information, then start ringing around some local solar installation people and get them to come round to your house. Now, it might be, if we're still under COVID, that they'll do a remote survey. And what that means is they'll just ask you for your address, and they will be able and ask you those questions about your usage. And what they'll do then is they'll do a desktop survey, and they'll look at Google Maps. They'll get a position of your house, its orientation, and they'll be able to then look at which way the house is facing, where best to place the solar panels on your roof, how many they believe that they could get on there, and they'll be able to provide you with an estimate as to, with their estimate, not just the cost of the installation, but what the energy that the installation will produce for you. So that'll give you an idea of, one, the cost of it, but also not just the cost of it, but how quickly you'll be able to recover that cost. Good. Well, that's the basics of it, really. What you can get on the roof, what it's going to cost, and how quickly you're going to get that money back. So you'll get the quotes in from the various suppliers, and they'll quote you of a variety of things, and probably 2 or 3 prices depending on which way you want to go. What I found is that they just want to sell you a 4 kilowatt system mainly. That will be their sort of bread and butter, if you like, the easy installation for them. It causes them minimum effort. 4 kilowatt installation. You don't need permission from your local energy supplier for a 4 kilowatt installation, or 3.6 as it is with your inverter, and a Tesla Powerwall battery. Okay, and you'll get a quote through for something like that with a Tesla Powerwall of around £12,000. That's a lot of money. Most of that cost is the Tesla Powerwall. Tesla Powerwall, I hear you say, what on earth is that? Well, that's a battery. More of that in just a moment, because battery technology is really what's turning energy consumption around domestically. But don't worry about a battery yet. Don't even think about a battery yet, because you don't even know if you're going to generate enough electricity to even fill it. So spending 8,000 quid on a posh Tesla Powerwall battery, as fantastic and as wonderful as they are, and as cheap as they are per kilowatt, it's a lot of money to spend. If you're watching this video and money is no object, well, you probably won't be watching this video anyway, because you'll just call out an installer, tell him you want your roof full of panels, a big posh battery in the garage, set me up, sign me up, you know. But I'm guessing as you are watching this video, you're a little bit more savvy. So that's not to say that people who are installing Tesla Powerwalls aren't savvy, okay? I just think it's much better to understand what they do, the limitations, and look at maybe a modular approach, particularly when you spend that sort of money. So anyway, each to their own. So they'll just want to put a 4 kilowatt system on your roof and then stick a Tesla Powerwall somewhere in your garage, 12,000 quid, and job done. Why is that easy, I hear you say? Why is a 4 kilowatt system easy, and why they want to sell you? Well, the reason for that is they don't have to go to your grid supplier, which in our case is SSE, and that's worth you finding out before you call anybody round as to who your local grid supplier is. You just type in a Google search, have a look on the map area where you are, click on it, and it'll tell you what your grid supplier is. As I say, ours is SSE. They don't have to go for the permission, and that can take quite some time to come through. So as long as you're generating no more than 3.6 kilowatts, that is the power of your inverter. Remember, that's the box that converts the energy from your solar panels into usable electricity. As long as you're not generating more than 3.6, no permissions required. You don't need planning permission to stick it on your roof, and you don't need permission from the grid to generate it. Nice and easy. Then stick a battery in, 12,000 quid, jobs are good. Well, even if you didn't have a battery and you just went for a 4 kilowatt system, that's going to generate some power for you. You're going to probably put some back to the grid, and you're going to use a fair amount, and that's going to start saving you some money, which is great. Which, if that's what you want to achieve, and the 4 or 5K's in your budget, then that's pretty much mission accomplished, and a fairly straightforward and simple installation to do. Something to think about though when you're doing this is that most of the UK, and most of the time, we don't have glorious weather. We have actually quite poor weather. We have weather that we've got today, which is mostly overcast. There are a few days, but actually we experienced fairly recently, over a few weeks ago, where you're going to get consistent sunshine. So you have to accept that the PV system is going to be limited by our own British weather and our climate. So if you've got a 4 kilowatt system, the maximum that is ever going to produce is 4 kilowatts. But it's only ever going to produce that at a really strong sunny day. And like I said, those in the UK are quite limited. So what people tend to do is they do what's called oversizing their inverter. I don't want to lose you here, and don't worry about the terminology. Oversizing the inverter. Look it up on Google. It's pretty straightforward, but let me give you a basic explanation. Your basic inverter, like I said earlier on, that they'll want to install is 3.6 kilowatts. of power that it would be able to give to you in the home or partly export. If you've got a 4 kilowatt system on your roof, that is all it's going to produce on the very, very best day. But what you want to plan for, in my opinion, is bad days. Really what you want to do is try and fit as many panels as you can on your roof. The maximum that you can oversize your inverter is 150%. So on a 3.6 kilowatt inverter, I'm going to have to do the maths on this because I'm doing it off the top of my head. The maximum you can really put on your roof is about 5 kilowatts. So on 150% of 3.6 is about 5.2 kilowatts. Okay, so the idea behind that is to maximize the amount of panels you can put on your roof. If you were to have a 5 kilowatts on those dull days, you've got more panels, even though they might be only producing, say their maximum is 300 watts, maybe they're only going to produce 80 to 100 watts on the duller days. The more panels you've got, then of course the greater power you're going to get back, and the more energy you're going to produce in terms of kilowatts, and ultimately the more efficient your system's going to be. So the other side of that, of course, the flip side of that is if your 3.6 kilowatts inverter is so your solar panels are generating maximum sunshine because of a beautiful day, it's generating 5 odd kilowatts. Your inverter is only ever going to produce 3.6. So you'll be what they call clipped. And you'll see there on your pattern when you see it online, when you log into your inverter software, which you can do online, you'll see that it won't ever go above 3.6 kilowatts. But the times that that's going to happen in any one year are very small versus the amount of time you're going to spend in gloomy conditions, not producing much, is much greater. So overall, you'll produce more energy by oversizing your inverter because you've got more panels on the roof, picking up more of the sunlight on those grayer days, producing more energy. You're more likely to get up towards the 3 kilowatts that your inverter is limited to than if you just had a 4 kilowatt system. I hope that makes sense. I tried to make it simple, but actually I may have even made it more complicated. Oversize your inverter by 150% to make maximum use on the dull days. That's all I had to say, probably. I hope you're still with me. Okay, that's what that means. But of course, the solar panels are going to be more expensive. So the more panels you put on your roof, the more expensive it's going to be. Which then brings me on to my next point. Cost. When you get your 3 quotes in, they'll vary quite significantly. They'll all give you a standard 4 kilowatt, maybe something slightly bigger, and stick a battery on it. But actually, when you look at them like for like and you compare apples with apples, you're like, well, hang on a minute. There's thousands of pounds worth of difference. You're still putting the same array on my roof. You're still sticking the same inverter in. Why is it so different in cost? Well, the reason that it is so different in cost is one is their installation fee. Okay, quite often they use outside sources to do the install, but also it's the cost of the solar panel. Now I said they've come down, and they have come down significantly, but it really depends on whether or not you're a designer person. I'm not really. This is actually my nephew's jumper. Okay, I don't go out and buy designer stuff. It just happens that he does. He didn't want it anymore and he gave it to me. Okay, so it depends if you want the latest designer stuff. Okay, and you might think that by spending more on your panel, it's going to last longer. Well, it probably isn't, is the reality of it. They all come with the same amount of warranty, and they've all got the same linear power line, if you like. So that's basically what it produces when it's brand new, 310 watts, for example, and over 20 years, it'll drop off by 10%. And they all have a very similar linear curve over a 25-year period. So if they're all producing pretty much this, well, if a 300, comparing apples with apples, if each panel produces 310 watts, has a 12-year warranty, and will give you a linear drop of 10% over 25 years, then what's the point? You know, what's the point in spending any more money? Well, there is no point really. It's just that some are branded and some aren't. If you were to go for LG solar panels, they're very expensive. If you were to go for JA solar panels, they're not so expensive, and they do the same job, and they'll give you the same power. So just have a look into your quote and ask the question, you know, what are these panels, what makes are they, and what else is available. So if you see that price is off the mark or off the scale compared to the others, ask that question. Personally, we've gone for JAA Solar. Lots of people have. They're nice and sleek. They're black, so they look nice on the roof, not these old silver sort of surround with the blue front, which I think look quite ugly. And they have great energy absorption and are relatively inexpensive compared to the branded panels. In my view, there's just no point in doing it. Where you should spend the money, however, is the inverter. Okay, and anybody worth their salt is going to offer you a Solar Edge inverter. The reason you spend the money on the inverter and not so much on the panels is because the inverter's the box of clever stuff. That's the thing that's going to take the energy generated from the panels, convert it into AC electrics, which is the power you use within your house, and get back to the grid, and do that most efficiently. Now, without getting too complicated, each one of the panels on your roof will be getting various amounts of sunlight, particularly if you're in a particularly shaded area, or you've got your neighbour's really annoying silver birch or willow tree that pops up above your house and blocks out your sun very first thing in the morning. Go round there, chop it down, saw it down, as if you don't get on with them. Otherwise, ask them politely if they might trim it for you or coppice it. The reason for that is that typically, if one or two of the panels are blocked, and I don't mean by your neighbour's tree, if it's blocked by your own chimney for a period of the day as the sun transits over from east to west, if there's any shaded areas in there and one of those panels is in the shade, then that will knock the whole lot out. And that's how it used to happen. And that's how a dumb inverter will work. It'll only really give you the power output of the least performing panel. And that is absolutely no use to man nor beast. Hopeless. What is the point in having 4 or 5 or 6 kilowatt system on your roof when you get a bit of shade and it's now producing 500 watts across the board? No point. So what a Solar Edge inverter will do is in behind each of the solar panels themselves is what they call a micro inverter. Okay, and each one of those micro inverters will send a signal into the Solar Edge inverter, and it will balance out the panels so that if one of them is producing poorly, it doesn't affect the rest of them. It will deal with each individual panel on its own. When you have a look at the online portal for your Solar Edge inverter, you'll even be able to see that in live data, exactly how much each panel is producing. That's where to spend the money, in my opinion. And the Solar Edge inverters are very competitively priced, and really, compared to others, are way better in terms of their performance. So for me, spend your money on a Solar Edge inverter, whatever size that might be, and don't worry about the latest fandangled LG super duper whooper duper panels. Just get JA Solar or an equivalent non sort of branded sexy panel, okay? But get them black, I think, because that looks really smart. All right, good. Well, that's your 9/10 of it there, really, I would say. You know how much you really want to spend or you can afford to spend. You know to spend the money on the inverter. You know probably in a 4 kilowatt system is going to work for you at around sort of mid 4s to early 5s. That should be absolutely fine. Then the next thing you want to look at from your installer is do they contract the work out elsewhere? And will they actually come out to the house and do a full inspection? I suppose really beyond that, I would always choose somebody that has scaffolding up at the house, because there are some installers out there that don't and will just use ladders. Excuse me. slurping away. Personally, I don't want anybody on my roof on a ladder, because I'm sure they've got liability insurance, or maybe even third-party liability insurance. I'm pretty sure they have to. But if somebody falls off your roof and kills themselves or severely injures themselves on your property, then I don't know where you stand legally. That's when you hit your head on the ground. I don't know where you stand legally if somebody hurts themselves on your premises. So avoid that if you can. Make sure your installer fits scaffolding. It's very safe for them. They put handrails all up the side. I might even have a photograph for you in a minute. And it's much safer for them. You might think, well, surely they would organise that anyway. Wouldn't it be in their interest? Well, if they're not actually fitting it themselves, then probably not. They'll just want to do it as cheaply as possible. But for the extra, I don't know what it is, 100 quid or 200 quid extra. I couldn't tell you what it was. But the big scheme of things, safety is number one, and I'd get the scaffolding up. That's it basically. Then really you've got pretty much an idea when they're asking you questions. You know what questions to ask, and I think that you'll be 90% there. What do we go for then? Well, I mentioned earlier on that a 3.6 kilowatt inverter, you don't need any permission from your energy supplier. If you go over that, you do, and you need to submit a G99 form. Your installer will tell you all about that, and will actually do it for you if that's the way that you wanted to go. We've got an enormous roof on our house. It is huge, with gables front and rear, and a nice big flat front on the front and the rear. So a 5 kilowatt system, I think 5.5 kilowatt with 18 panels on our roof with a 3.6 kilowatt inverter. We were going to oversize by 150%. 18 panels at 310 watts was gonna, well, you can work it out, was going to give us over 5 kilowatts of power. But I looked at this and I thought, well, and I discussed this with the installer, going slightly more, how much extra would a slightly larger inverter cost? Answer, £160. That doesn't seem too bad. £160 for a bigger inverter. Okay, well, how much more would another, if we can get it, another, 7 panels be? Well, it's going to be just over 1,200 quid with the micro inverters and the slightly larger inverter. Okay, so that's about 20% more expensive. And how long will it take me to get my money back? Well, actually, similar sort of time, because the extra cost, I'll be getting more energy back. So it made sense for me to explore that, and discussing that through with the installer. There was no problem with getting the extra 7 panels on the roof. I looked at our neighbours who had done something very similar. And now with something like 25 panels on our roof, we're now developing nearly 7 kilowatts with a 7.5 kilowatts with a 5 kilowatt inverter. So we're actually able to produce a lot more power on the sunnier days. But remember, with 25 panels, we're going to be producing more power than when we had 18. So my reasons for that were, I didn't want to put anything back to the grid. At 5 pence per kilowatt, it rarely gets that cheap for consumption. So there's very little point in selling it back cheaply and buying it more expensively when we needed it. So for me, the minimum amount that we can put back to the grid, the better. So we decided, as part of our installation, and this is something that you want to think about as well, is generating with the excess solar that we're generating over and above what we're using in the house. There are systems there that will actually heat up your hot water. And so we're going to have this installed at the same time as we have the solar, a Myenergi Eddi. There's the iBoost as well, which is a system that some will be familiar with. Does the same job, but the Myenergi is just a little bit cleverer. Anyway, the idea with that is it looks at what you're using in your house. It looks at what you're generating on your roof. If there's an excess, that would normally then just go back to the grid, and you'll be paid £5 per kilowatt. Or £5 would be lovely. 5 pence per kilowatt. Well, like I said, no point in doing that. It costs me more to use it. So let's heat up our hot water. I keep putting this screen on because otherwise it just ends up with a black hole behind me and a big shadow. Right, go away. Yes, go away. So for the excess energy that we're producing, we may as well just heat up our hot water. And that's exactly what the system does. If my roof is producing 5 kilowatts of power and we're using 2 kilowatts in the house, then 3 kilowatts of it will go to heat the hot water. So the idea is that we wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning on a beautiful sunny day. By the time everyone needs to use the shower, there will be at least enough hot water to have a couple of showers. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And the system will continue to do that until such time as the water temperature has reached the thermostat temperature on the immersion heater. That's the little button you can select yourself. You just take the cover off and set it from maximum to minimum. I think the maximum is like 60 degrees. So it'll continue to do that. And on the Myenergi app, you can boost it if you want to. So if you need it immediately, it'll just work like a normal immersion heater, or you can set timers. So really clever stuff. So what I suggest you do is have a look at myenergi.com and have a look at the equipment that they have on there. Take a look at the Eddi, it's called EDDI. You'll need a hub that goes with that as well. So that enables you to then operate the Eddi remotely. The other thing that we're looking at, as well as I may have said already, is the electric car. So as of next week, we've got a 40 kilowatt Nissan Leaf, which is coming. My wife's old Range Rover Evoque came to the end of its PCP. We handed it back to the finance company, went off on a low loader yesterday, and on Friday another low loader is going to come. It's going to deliver us our electric car. So again, the other reason I wanted to produce more energy from the roof is, one, I wanted to heat my hot water, and secondly, I'm going to put a Myenergi Zappi. I'll talk more about the Eddi and the Zappi later in completely separate videos because they are worth a video just on their own. Okay, but I'm just talking to you about my solar and why we went the way that we did. So the Zappi will go outside on the wall there, then the car will plug into it, and again it will work in exactly the same way. It'll look at what we're using, it will look at how much excess there is, and it will pump that into the car. You have options then of boosting, you have options of being 100% green and only using solar, or tapping in a little bit from the grid. So I like that. I think that's a very clever way of using your energy. And on the Myenergi app, you can then prioritize. So perhaps you don't need that much hot water today. Then maybe the whole family are out and I'm on my own. That'd be lovely. I'm saying that because I'm in here on my own. And in which case you want to charge a car up because you want to go out or something, or you're going to need it the following day, and you could swap the priorities around so that it charges the car first before it does the hot water. And that's fantastic. So in closing then, think about what you want. Are you thinking about an electric car? Are you thinking about ways of heating your hot water? And then look at how you can maximize what's available on your roof. Ultimately, you're going to have a budget. Okay, work within that budget. See what options are available to you. Don't just go. I mean, obviously, budget's super important because at the end of the day, you can only spend what you can spend, okay? If you've got some flexibility in that budget, don't just settle for a 3.6 kilowatt inverter and 4 kilowatts on your roof because it's going to limit you. And if you want to expand that later on, then you're going to have to call somebody out to do it. So if you've got a little bit of extra money now, it's worth you thinking about something slightly larger, something more perhaps on your roof, and maybe something to heat your hot water, or if you want to go down the EV route, then obviously the more power you're producing, the more you're going to benefit from these things. It's as simple as that. So just think a little bit outside the box, I would say. Be a bit proactive with it, because like I say, the temptation, what they'll try and sell is a standard 4 kilowatt system, and they'll probably try and throw a battery in there as well. Okay, batteries. Probably another subject again, but as I've mentioned it already, and I'm conscious that I've steered you away from it. I don't want to do that. I just want to give you the whole picture. I'm not going to go for a battery at the moment because I want to use much of my energy myself. That is heating my hot water and charging my car and using what we can in the house. However, The great thing about the battery, and the super clever thing about the battery, and there are various ones out on the market, is that whilst you're producing excess energy, if there is any, it'll store it in the battery. So when the sun goes down, you can then literally run your house off of your battery. So the idea is that particularly during good days and sunny days, you can be off grid. I mean, that is really cool. You're not drawing any energy from the grid whatsoever. You are generating your own. You're paying nothing apart from maybe your standard charge. That's clever stuff. And particularly if you're a green energy sort of person and you're worried about your sort of carbon footprint, generating your own electricity is just wizard. And that could be a way forward. But like I say, it's not cheap. Battery technology is getting cheaper. The materials are getting cheaper. Elon Musk is producing some new cells now that are going to last 1 billion years. And I imagine over the next 10 years, battery technology will be 1/3 of the cost that it is now. There are different battery manufacturers out there. Things to consider. How much will it hold? And how much will it discharge in one go? That is really important. Let me give you an idea. Your kettle will draw anywhere between 2.5 and 3 kilowatts. That's how it boils the water in less than 30 seconds. It's because it just sucks power. So if your battery only lets 1.5 or 2 kilowatts go, that's fine. It'll produce an amount, but the rest of it's going to come from the grid. So that's what you've got to think about. Equally, if it only holds 3 kilowatts, whilst it might charge fairly quickly and be full and sitting there ready for you, by the time you've had a couple of cups of tea and watched an episode of Neighbours, did I just say Neighbours? I meant EastEnders. I'm showing my age. But it was cool. Neighbours was cool. Just going back, just reminiscing now. I got completely off piste. So by the time you've watched a soap and bought a couple of cups of tea, that's going to finish your battery off pretty much. So yeah, I mean, there's cheaper ones and more expensive ones. I will say with batteries, you get what you pay for if that's the way that you want to go. But look, the nice thing about getting the battery installed straight away is you only pay 5% VAT. Brilliant. Anything that's connected to your solar is 5% VAT. If you get it paid at a later date, it's 20% VAT. So you're going to be paying a little bit more for it. But my view is there's no point putting in if you don't think you're going to use it. Particularly if you're using it to charge cars and you're charging your hot water. Depends on which way you want to go. That's a much cheaper way to go for me anyway, and the way that I wanted to do it. However, stay tuned because I will be able to see how much energy I'm producing. So over the course of a month, I'll be able to see on the website what I've produced from my solar, what I've used of that solar, what I have taken from the grid, and what I've put back into the grid. And if I'm seeing that I'm putting many kilowatts back to the grid and only getting 5 pence a kilowatt for it over the course of a year, then I might look at installing a battery, and that'll be something for a separate video. Anyway, I'm conscious now that this has gone on for nearly 40 minutes. So I hope you found it useful. I hope you've got something to go on. I hope my installation has just given you a broad picture, not just of what we wanted to do, how it's worked for us, but how it could work for you, and has given you 1 or 2 tips to set you on your path, so you're not going into it too green, okay? So that the system that you end up with is a system that you want and not the one that the installer wanted to give you, okay? Thanks very much for watching. As always, stay tuned because the next video will be the solar panel installation, and I'm going to really annoy the guys that are doing it because I'm going to be videoing them all the way, okay? And I'll give you the details of who we've chosen in the next video. Thanks for watching.